Chapter 5. My mother is a writer, a real one, not just somebody with a manuscript in a desk drawer that she'll finish someday when her kid finally gets arrested or goes to college. She writes a regular column in a local newspaper about women in sports and has had 3 articles published in Sports Illustrated. 2 of them were space fillers, but one was a feature on a teenage girl who swam the English Channel. They sent her to the girl's house in Southern California and even put her up in a motel with a telephone in the bathroom. I know, she called me from there. Mom has always had primo word processing equipment, including the latest in laser printers so sophisticated they double as weapons guidance systems, which is why Sarah Burns and I were able to bring our readers such a high-quality rag from the information underground. Mom taught me to use her fancy electronic gadgetry clear back in grade school when she encouraged me to keep a journal. But even though she taught me to hide it in the computer so even she couldn't get to it without the code, I'm smarter than to put my thoughts about myself and others down in writing, where somebody might chance onto them and have me put to death. Anyway, Sarah Burns and I had decided to lay off Dale Thornton for a while, at least until our wounds healed, and concentrate on an expose about Motz's 2-headed son, the outcome of his clandestine sexual foray with a group of particularly brutal aliens one night several years back when he was wigged out on cocaine. According to our meticulously researched story, whenever Motz came up short on new ways to treat kids astonishingly, he consulted with Huey Dewey, one name for each head, whom he kept locked in the earth cellar behind his house. I was revising the part where Huey Dewey got into an argument with itself regarding the relative value of humiliating a kid in front of the class versus the 3-holed paddle, and began banging its heads together in violent confrontation when my doorbell rang. I looked out the window to see whether I wanted to answer the door, and standing right there beside Sarah Burns, looking almost as if he had come above ground to live full-time, was Dale Thornton. Sarah Burns was bringing a future freeway sniper into my home. Oh God, I promise never to shoplift again or touch myself without my clothes on. If you'll please, just please let me live through this day. I stared across our attic room at Dale Thornton, who, unlike Sarah Burns, had not refused my offer of Oreos and was, in fact, finishing up the package. Feeling invaded, I wondered if General Eisenhower let the Russians come into his house when they invited them to be on his side in World War II. If he did, I bet Mammy, that was Ike's wife, didn't use the good silverware. So this is where you freakos hang out, Dale said through a mouth full of dark brown crumbs and frosting. He was sunk into a beanbag chair, scanning the room, gripping the sack of cookies as if it were a flotation device on the Titanic, and the captain had just yelled, "Save the women and children first!" A home-crafted tattoo sporting "Born to Raise Hell" on a banner across a very poor excuse for a Harley-Davidson insignia graced his right forearm. He wore blue jeans, more whole than jean, and a black Twisted Sister t-shirt, a complimentary pack of cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve, which also showed serious signs of aging. His curly brown hair clung matted to his forehead, and my olfactory senses said without question it was closing in on the time of month when the Thorntons should consider emptying the moonshine out of the bathtub. Sarah Burns followed Dale's suspicious eyes around our attic hideaway. "Pretty nice, huh?" she said. "Been in nicer." "Maybe till you heard the sirens coming," Sarah Burns said, and I closed my eyes and held my breath. "I've been by your place, Dale Thornton. You got a bunch of old wrecked cars in your yard, and I'd live in any one of them before I'd live in that house. And there's got to be a skinny old dog factory out back somewhere. I don't care if you want to live like a pig. Nobody can help what their family's like. But don't you go saying been in nicer when you live like you live in some castle. You guys invite me here to polish off these cookies, or you got something you want to talk about?" I looked to Sarah Burns. This was her idea. She said, What happened when you got home the other night after school? Old man Mott's call your dad and tell him about the chewing tobacco? None of your damn business, Dale snapped. He didn't do nothing. That right? Sarah Burns challenged. That why you didn't show up to school for 3 days and why you wore that stupid-looking turtleneck sweater for 3 days? My brother gave me that sweater, Scarface. Doesn't mean you have to wear it. Just offer him a deal, I pleaded in my head, unable for the life of me to understand why Sarah Burns wanted to stir him up. Someone could get hurt, and I was farthest from the door. So what did your daddy do? Really? Same thing your daddy would have done, he nodded toward me. Or Fat Boy's. He kicked my ass. What do you care? Just wondered. I started to tell Dale I didn't have a dad, and my mom has never raised a hand of violence toward me, if you don't count when I was 3 and peed down the heat register during a week-long siege of below-zero weather, but I thought better. If Dale Thornton has a need to believe I get a regular ass-kicking, think away, Dale Thornton. I have recuperative work to do before I mess with you again. So I got places to go, Dale said. I don't got all day to sit around and talk to a couple of freakos. What do you guys want? Got anything else to eat? Out of self-preservation, I went behind the dusty, overstuffed couch at the far end of the attic, returning with a giant bag of corn chips. Yeah, Dale said, tearing them out of my hand before I could sit down, scattering perfectly good and unbroken chips across the hardwood floor. Damn, they make these bags so you can't hardly get them open. The point is, Sarah Burns said, as Dale stuffed his face with my corn chips, that Mott's singed Eric's butt for producing a paper he said was trash, but he used the information in it to singe your butt. And speaking of butts, who do you think got the biggest bang out of you kicking Eric's butt? Me, Dale said, smiling, nodding toward me, salty crumbs sticking to his lower lip and chin. Sarah Burns shook her head. Couldn't have been much of a big deal for you, unless you're the biggest wuss since Mr. Rogers. She cast a semi-disgusted look at me. You could have got a better fight out of Norman Nickerson. Motts, that's who really got off on it. He got Eric good and didn't have to lift a finger because he had a goon do it for him. Dale achieved a passable imitation of thinking. Maybe you're right, he said finally. So what? So, we want to keep printing the paper, and we don't want to get killed doing it. We have a deal to make with you. Make it. You protect us, and your name is never seen in crispy pork rinds again, unless it's for receiving a Congressional Medal of Honor. You can be on the staff. Every week, we'll let you pick out one thing to write about, and we'll do all the grunt work. It'll be like you're literate. Dale didn't pick up on the last comment, but the rest must have sounded good, though he didn't make any promises. Sarah Burns said after he was gone that we were free to go right on pleading the fifth and cranking out our weekly rag. It is nearly impossible for me to admit to people, be they friend or foe, what is important to me. A counselor friend of Mom's once said that's merely a function of adolescence, that teenagers are into separating from our parents and others in authority in order to establish our independence. To do that effectively, we have to believe ourselves as immortal and therefore incapable of facing our emotional truths. Well, let me say something perfectly clear. As Richard Nixon says on those old news clips about the Watergate scandal, right before he's about to fill the room with fog, I am not immortal. I've spent more than 10 hours in the psych ward with Sarah Burns, really and truly the toughest person in our solar system, and I'll tell you what, if life can shoot Sarah Burns out of the sky, it can nail me blindfolded. In truth, the only reason I don't allow people up close and personal with my emotional self is that I hate to be embarrassed. I can't afford it. I spent years being embarrassed because I was fat and clumsy and afraid. I wanted to be tough like Sarah Burns, to stand straight and tall, oblivious to my gut, eclipsing my belt buckle, and say, "Up yours!" But I was paralyzed. So I developed this pretty credible comedy act. I'm the I don't care kid, which is what I assume most other kids do. But I'm not stupid. I believe there is important shit to be dealt with. That's why I like Lemry's Contemporary American Thought class, which we call CAT for short. Lemry makes it safe to give any idea consideration, and she is ferocious in protecting the sensibilities of anyone willing to take a risk. You can celebrate or slam any idea you want, but you can't slam people. It's the most important class I have, and I'm glad both my friends and enemies are signed up. Ellerby is there, and so is Mark Britton, and so is Jody Mueller. I almost bowl Britton over beating the bell into Cat. He's standing just inside the doorway talking with his girlfriend, who should be mine, but doesn't know it yet. Jody Mueller, the classiest looking girl in our school, and maybe the Milky Way. Hey, Moby, take it easy. Britton acts as if he likes me. But after Ellerby, I would be the first on his secret ballot for candidates to be buried in a shallow grave with a small air pipe pushing up into a bus garage. I say, sorry, I'm not, but until Jody understands that beauty is only skin deep, I want to appear civil in her eyes. Britton puts out his hand. You guys sure got me the other day. I don't know what he's talking about. A workout. It was a good move. I smile and raise my eyebrows. It was a good move. I turn from my seat as the bell rings, but Mark catches me, softly by the shoulder. Can I ask you something? Jody stands silently beside him. Sure. Why'd you guys do it? What do you mean? You and Ellerby must really hate me. I hit 97 repeats with you, and you sucked me into losing out on the last 3. I can't imagine ever doing that to either of you. I can. My stare drifts to Jody. I'm guessing she believes Britton was victimized by a couple of insensitive pagan mermen. We were just being ornery, I say slowly, hoping to avoid alienating my future wife. But you were on a free ride. I'd set the pace and you'd hang in. Ellerby would set the pace and you'd hang in. You never set the pace. All you'd have to do was ask, he says. Then, it wasn't a very Christian thing to do, that's all. You don't get very far into a conversation with Mark Britton without hearing that word. It irritates me because what he really means is, you're wrong, and I'm right, and God knows it. I want to tell him I'm not a Christian, but that won't likely put me in better standing with Jody, who goes to Mark's church, so I just look away. You could be a little more compassionate, Calhoun. You know, you guys run around in that car making fun of important things and blaspheming, and you don't have much consideration for the people you may hurt. I'm caught. I mean, I can't take a guy seriously when he's using words like blaspheming, but I'm over a barrel if I don't want to look like the worst kind of heretic in front of Jody. What I'd like to do is make Britton horizontal, but that would only put me another rung lower on Jacob's ladder in Jody's eyes. It's a close call, though. I'm pretty embarrassed, and if Britton says much more, I might at least have to do verbal surgery on him. Britton looks wounded. My portrait as an ogre is complete. I make a note that he will not finish ahead of me on even one repeat today in workout. He and Jody walk off to their seats as I tell her, nice blouse. Great moves, Moby. Park it, Lemry says, scanning her attendance book. She moves to the front of her desk, hoisting herself up. At the end of last class, I asked each of you to be ready with a subject for your class presentation. Something that addresses a contemporary social or psychological or spiritual dilemma. I asked that it be something with particular meaning to your life. Now, today, I gave you possibilities such as war, world hunger, abortion, the homeless, children's rights, spiritual beliefs, political ideologies, etc. All I require is that you be willing to look at your subject from a personal perspective, that is, how the dilemma affects you. She glances quickly around the room. Anybody want to step up and save those who didn't believe I meant what I said? Ellerby's hand shoots up. That's a surprise. To the rescue, he says, I want to talk about religion. As long as you don't try to lead us in prayer, it's against the law. Rest assured, Ellerby says, I won't lead us in prayer. I'll leave that to Britain. And no personal remarks, Lemry warns. Ellerby nods assent. I brought a tape, he says. I want to play it. Lemry has audio and video equipment available because she has encouraged us to bring in outside stimuli to promote discussion. It's a song, Ellerby says. Everybody's recording it these days, but this was the first person I ever heard. He pops in the cassette and passes out a sheet of lyrics, some of which are underlined, along with a color reproduction of the NASA photo of Earth taken from the moon. The song is From a Distance by Julie Gold, and it's sung by a country singer named Nancy Griffith. Nancy's nasal twang brings a few guffaws from the heavy metal set, but we settle in on the lyrics, which talk about how, from a distance, like maybe out in space, the world looks good. The air appears crisp and blue. Mountains are capped with a pure, clean snow frosting. And there's no scum floating where the ocean meets the shore. From that distance, you can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. And when that's true, there's no reason to fight. You can't see germs and people dying from diseases. It's just all one big whole thing that needs to be taken care of by everyone, like a beautiful house and yard. Then in the last verse, Nancy says that's where God watches us from a distance. It's a good song. A great song. There's a stroke of real genius, Britton says immediately. Wouldn't you just expect some theological prodigy driving a blasphemous Pontiac station wagon to bring us his religious view packaged in a country western song? If thine enemy offend thee, Reverend Swaggart, Ellerby says back, meet him out behind the gym after school. Lemry looks around the room in mock exaggeration. Did anyone hear me say no personal remarks? Her eyebrows arch for the sky as she points one index finger at each. Those are the rules. Don't make me enforce them at workout. I see her point is well taken. Mess up my class, and I'll swim you so hard your arms will drift unattached to the bottom of the pool. Lemry says, so make your point, Mr. Ellerby. My point is that God created a prototype for a reasonably sturdy carbon unit, gave us a perfectly usable place to live, some excellent advice as in words to live by, most of which are misunderstood by the least of my brethren, and stood back to see what we'd do with it. I'm surprised. I didn't know Ellerby had any philosophical considerations. I thought he just drove this Christian cruiser through the world seeing whose nose he could get up, and how far. Lemry's eyes land on me. Moby? My hands shoot up in surrender. I give wide berth to all religious discussions. My plan is to get baptized late in the afternoon of the evening I die, so I don't have time to sin. A spot in heaven awaits me. Cute, she says, and chicken. Jody? Shoot. I should have uttered something biblical. Jody flashes a sideways glance at Mark, saying simply, I guess I think God takes a closer look than that. I could go either way on this. I don't have a quarrel with Christianity one way or the other. As near as I know, Mom doesn't have any religious beliefs, so I wasn't brought up with any. I know some Bible stories from going to Sunday school with my friends when I was younger, but mostly they were just good stories. I see where getting religion quick here could work to my advantage with Jody, but I can't jump ship on my friend Ellerby. Steve has a reputation as a verbal troublemaker, and I would abandon him in a second thought for Jody alone, but not for Mark Britton. So, though I can once again see how the Russians and the Americans fought on the same side in World War II, I'm Switzerland. Goodbye, Jody, my love. Give us more information, Steve, Lemry says. If you're right, what does it mean? I'm not sure what all it means, he says, but I'll tell you what made me bring it in. The other day, when Moby was trying to figure out whether the world was a good place or a bad place, he used Sarah Burns for an example. I was ready to agree with him, no question. She's got a tough road to go down, and when I thought about it more, I realized the world is a good place for me, most of the time anyway, and that got me thinking about fairness. If God is fair, how do you explain me and Sarah Burns on the same planet? And if he really rewards piousness and public prayer and all that, like Britain seems to think, how come he lets me drive my car around without blowing out my tires? And how come he lets me kick Britain's butt in the pool? Lemmy says, watch it. I had this Sunday school teacher, Ellerby goes on, and every time I asked her a tough question like, how come nobody ever caught Jack the Ripper? Or, why did my big brother get killed when he got straight A's clear through college and was going into the seminary? She says the Lord works in strange and mysterious ways that we may not understand. Eber leans forward on his desk now, his intensity as visible as the pulse in his temple. But I think there's nothing strange and mysterious about it. I figure if those things were in God's jurisdiction, he'd do something different about them. But they aren't. Those are in our jurisdiction. I glance over to check Jody's reaction, but can't read a thing. Britain, on the other hand, is having blood pressure difficulty and explodes. This is so much BS. People throw out this line of crap for one reason, so they can do whatever they darn well please. It's a bogus way of not having to be accountable to God. Ellerby ignores him. I mean, like Britain isn't even in the room, and continues. From a distance, he says, my car looks like every other car on the freeway, and Sarah Burns looks just like the rest of us. And if she's going to get help, she'll get it from herself, or she'll get it from us. Let me tell you why I brought this up. Because the other day, when I saw how hard it was for Moby to go to the hospital to see her, I was embarrassed that I didn't know her better, that I ever laughed at one joke about her. I was embarrassed that I let some kid go to school with me for 12 years and turn my back on pain that must be unbearable. I was embarrassed that I haven't found a way to include her, somehow, the way Moby has. Jesus, I feel tears welling up, and I see them running down Ellerby's cheeks. Lemmy better get a handle on this class before it turns into some kind of therapy group. So, Lemmy says quietly, your subject will be the juxtaposition of man and God in the universe? Ellerby shakes his head. My subject will be shame. Chapter 5 analysis. When we take a look at Chapter 5, we begin to see more characters flesh out. We get to understand them a little bit more. We see that Dale Thornton was put up to everything, and that now he seems to be okay. He's on the side of Sarah and Eric in a weird way, and now they're kind of all on the same team working together. In addition to that, we see the development of 3 more characters, really. Mark Britton, Jody Mueller, and Steve Ellerby. And some big things come out in this chapter. Thing number 1. The swimming sort of, I don't know if you want to call it prank or shenanigans, whatever you want to call it, against Mark are used and weaponized by Mark to get Eric looking bad in front of Jody Mueller. So this tells us a little bit about the character of Mark Britton. He's a very religious person. We knew that already because he led the prayer circle. But he also sees the world only through the religion. So he says to Eric, you did something and you're not very Christian, basically you're a bad person. And he does that because he's trying to make himself look better by saying that. Additionally, we are learning this interesting fact, I guess, that Steve really is into Jody Mueller, like really into her. And she happens to be going out with the person he hates the most. So that's kind of a big problem. On top of that, we are sort of introduced to and we see the development of the character of Steve Ellerby. And it's a pretty interesting character. He's a preacher's kid. He's sort of anti-establishment religion, which is kind of a crazy idea because his dad is religion. And we see that he gives a little bit of backstory. And the backstory that he gives is that his brother died. His brother who had all A's and his brother who was going to go on and become a priest like his own father was killed Um, uh, and that's a crazy idea. It really makes Steve Ellerby a totally different character than we had thought of before. Before he was just kind of this boring sidekick who, let's be honest, was just a swimmer and that's all we knew. And now we see him more as a person, with a little bit more uh, motivation. You know, maybe the reason he does the things he does is because his brother died in the way that he did, and that's kind of sad. There's lots of stuff to pay attention to moving forward. Steve is one of them, but also this new kind of situation with Britton, Jody Mueller, and Eric. All right, we're going to keep on going, guys.